Testing, testing. Okay, it's easier when I speak. It's easier for me. Hello, can you hear me? Testing, testing. Great. Okay. Hello, thank you for coming. What would you like me to do? I'm here for a bit. Unfortunately have a call in 40 minutes. I have to go to. But till then, you can just ask me as many questions as you want. And I'm happy to show and share things. Primarily, this goal of this is to try and just to get it to work, to see what the problems are, so that we can try and do this more frequently and to make it more smooth. So I've been trying my best to figure out the right software and the right orders of these things. It's not been super easy, but hopefully got something working, functioning a bit. The fact you can hear me, and the fact you can see the code and see purple on these, pretty crazy. Do you want me to change my colours? Purple cool, or do you want me to make me more normal? All I can see is yes in the chat. I'm trying to change the code around. Someone asked me, what's the synth to the left? Oh, this synth here? I think that's what we're talking about. This is the Strike FET. This is a very small MIDI synthesizer, which is part of my portable tool. So basically everything on the desk here, except for this microphone, fits into this chap here, which is my Peli case. So when I go travelling and performing, I can fit it all into this guy here. So it weighs around about 15 kilograms, and so I can stick it on a phone. then, but maybe we're talking about this on the side of here. This one, it's more like a ghetto blaster. Oh, sorry, yes, the oceans. Turn those down. Where are they? So, I'll just put those on just so we can see the sound works from Sonic Pi, which it does. Yeah, so this is the side of here, which I'm holding like a ghetto blaster. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? This is a Moog synthesizer, yep. It's the Sub Fatty. This was a gift from Moog themselves when I did a performance in the Moog Fest a couple of years ago. So instead of paying me money and having to deal with taxes and stuff, they sent me one of these guys. It was brilliant. This is a lot of fun, but it is super heavy, and the cases for them, which protect them, are also super heavy. So it's to actually perform with one of these, or if I travel around the world, I'm going to need to hold a roadie in a van, which is never going to happen. So this is nice for the home, but it's not great for mobile performances. Should I turn the oceans off? They're not really essential. I just wanted to see if the sound works. Let's get rid of them there. There we are. Okay. So, what would you like to know? Does that answer the question? Not sure. Any more questions? Volunteer to be roadie, it'll be very nice. Yeah, I need some gigs first. Really, that's the primary blocker for these things. So I get a lot of gigs from industrial people. So these are conferences and venues like that, where they're happy to have me along and do a talk and give a performance to the attendees. But really, I'm looking for much more traditional gigs. But they're hard to come by because people haven't really. It's very hard to communicate how interesting, exciting live coding is, and I think that a lot of live coding, and to be honest, a lot of my live coding isn't yet ready for festivals in the same way that a guitar band would be, or a synthesizer band, or a DJ. We're still very early days, so I think it's trying to both educate people and also improve our abilities to actually excite people musically is the challenge ahead. How is the support through Patreon working for me? Are you barely scraping by, or is it actually helping? Well, so at the moment I'm in a lucky position where I still have bits of money left from organisation donations. So we had an individual donated quite a significant amount, which has given me a few more months of salary. So the Patreon support at the moment is accruing into the bank. So I've just created a company, which is then I'm putting that money into, which I'll then be able to pay myself a salary once the university funding is completely dried up, because once the money from the university funding is dried up, then I'm out of a job, and then I have to either get another job or support myself. And so the Patreon money is not required yet, but it's adding up, so that will give me a few months of direct salary. But it's not even beginning to be a fifth of what I currently earn as a researcher, which is a quarter of what many people earn, or half as a software developer. So there's a big financial difference between what I could earn if I went to work for company X versus what I'm currently earning as a researcher, and then even a bigger drop down for what I would get from Patreon. So the way I see it in the future is that, I mean, it'd be ideal if more people supported me on Patreon. That would give me less worry about figuring out how to get external funds in. But I think probably a combination of Patreon and money from gigs and money from workshops and talks possibly might allow me to scrape through. But right now it's not looking hopeful. So I think it's 7 months left of my funding at the university, and that 7 months really have to ramp up what I'm earning through Patreon and external activities to a point where I can convince my family this is a good idea to go forwards, because obviously they want to eat. So yeah, I think increasing Patreon, if I could double the number of people supporting on Patreon, that starts to become a lot more safe as a basis, of which on top of that I can then earn money from gigs and performances. But still, it's not looking great. Does that answer your question, Boris? But it is helping, for sure. And it's also, the money from Patreon is also helping me pay for the website, for the forums, which costs money, both in terms of the hosting, in terms of the emails, the system. So all these things are there. And the reason why I've moved the forums to Patreon only is because as the number of users scale up, the costs for me scale up as well, personal costs. So if I can attach or associate the number of Patreons with the amount of money, the amount of costs of the website, then that feels like a fair thing to do. But it's sad. I really want everything to be free as much as possible. But the reality of the world is we need to pay for our food. Any more questions? There's just silence in the rooms. Maybe I should go back to the oceans. So what do people want from this? What would you like me to show you, share with you? Really, without questions, I'm just going to stand here and wave my arms around like a plonker. Right. Is this a good setup? Would you like to change this in any way? How would this work better for you? Yes, I wish there was a way so I don't have to worry about money. I hate money. Money is awful. I don't need much money, really, relatively. I just want it to be secure so that my family doesn't have to worry about it. And that's the biggest issue. And I've been so lucky to have been funded for so long, but even that funding has been dramatically difficult. It's been month by month, or 2 months here, or 6 weeks there. And every time you come to a point where this is going to be it, that's the end of the money, it's stressful. And when the Raspberry Pi Foundation cancelled the funding last year, that was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, because I thought I was doing really well. And they just decided that I didn't have enough focus on education or impact, and they stopped it. Do I use pre-written, commented out code samples when I play in a performance, or do I write everything from scratch? Both. So I have the secret, I'll show you, snippet functionality inside Solid Pi. So, well, actually there's two ways. There's a non-secret load example. So there's a couple of examples I use for performances. One is the re-resed one, so you can see here there's re-res there. And when I run this code, it just replaces the buffer with the contents of the example. So rather than having to go to the example documentation thing and cut and paste and put it in there, I can just write load example. So I'll often move from re-resed on one workspace to, actually already is there, Tilburg 2 on another workspace. So let's just load that up as if I was doing it in a performance. And then I'm using this ridiculous keyboard, which I'm no good at yet at all, but feels like the way forwards. So bear with me whilst I'm typing extremely slowly. Load example Tilburg 2, and again, and I'll have this one ready as well. So they'll be able to switch between the two different buffers, the workspaces, as I'm doing a mix. So I'll use those as pre-recorded, pre-made pieces. And to me, it's really important to try and think about how I can get code or music really that the audience has heard before, so they can actually start to say, that's a piece by Sam Aaron, as opposed to just more random electronic music. So it's having something memorable. So having it as an example, hopefully people will play with examples and hear it as a piece, and then they won't have seen the kind of things that I do with it, because I obviously treat these as starting points, and I'll start to modify them. I can show you how to do that in a moment if you want. But to continue to answer the question, the other aspect is the snippet functionality. So this is already in your Sonic Pi, so I just haven't documented it yet. For example, if you type LL and tab, it'll automatically complete out with a live loop like this, and you can start to fill it in. So let's call it foo, and then I'll already add some stuff in there. And you can write your own snippets. So I've got one which will, actually I need to load it up. So there's, down at the bottom of this file, I've got this load snippets command here, if you can see that. And this is just a directory of files which have the SPS extension. And those files themselves, actually let's try and, I've only got OBS to show you Sonic Pi, not Emacs. So let me just copy and paste something in there. I can find one of these things. So where did I put it? In Node, snippets, ARP. What's that one? There we are. Let's just copy and paste it in here. So here's what a snippet looks like. So it's just a file that contains these two things. first is, and these are just stolen really from TextMate snippet system. The first is some comments, which is to describe, the key is what shortcut I type in, so that's the acronym, and then I press tab and boom, it then fills out with everything beyond the comment line. So if I type ARP then tab, then you'll see the live loop, MIDI ARP, sync beats, etc. And the other two comments are the point line, so the line where the points, that's the cursor, should end up on, and the index, so what the X offset in that line, the point should end up at. So you can get the, if you notice with the live loop, when I press tab, the cursor is ready to type the name of the live loop in. So it's the point is on line 0, but the index is offset, not 0. And so if I have a file with this in it, and then I load it up the directory, I can now say ARP and do tab. Actually, let's run this file, and there we are. You can actually see now it auto-completed. So before it didn't, because I hadn't actually loaded the snippets in, but after it did. And I use snippets a fair bit for certain pieces of code that I use a lot, certain algorithms or certain live loops. Or in the case of where I work with my guitarist friend Ben Smith, we have I think it's inputs. Yeah. So we have a bunch of inputs that we usually work with on his massive sound card, and these, so we always typically plug them in the same order. So I have a snippet just to say load up those snippets. So load up, connect, reroute the audio in the way that we understand that we're expecting. So when we can do a gig, we can just fire up that code, and instantly we can start to hear the bass on input 1, the guitar on input 2, etc. And so yeah, so I'll use a bit of both. And then the thing is, I tend to use the snippets and the examples as starting points. And so if I want to make a big change to the sound, one way of doing that is to obviously remove a lot of the sound, but another one is to actually modify the code substantially. So the way to do that is to remove a bunch of code and replace it with new code. And rather than laboriously type it all out, if I have a good idea of where I want to go and I've been there before, and save it as a snippet, it's a great way just to shift direction in the performance. Right. So, exactly. Are you aware of other people who do similar things as you in Interaction Labs? There's loads of people doing live coding music. There's a whole, you should look at the toplap.org website. That's describing a lot of people. They're mostly on the Algorave community, which seems to be fairly distinct from the Sonic Pi community. But there's lots of interesting things going on. People have been making music with code for years. In fact, the 50s was, I think, when it started, with Max Matthews. So, yeah, lots of people doing crazy things of music, arts, visuals, everywhere. There's a nice link to a website which describes all of the cool live coding systems for music, as well as live coding systems for visuals. I try and remember. I'll write it up in a Patreon post which describes this. Let me just write a comment to myself to remember to do that, so I can link to these things, so you can look and explore. The big difference, I think, and obviously this is me talking about my own systems, is that Sonic Pi has a specific focus on making things simple and easy to do, and a lot of these other systems don't necessarily have that as their primary focus or goal, which means that often they're just trying to. It's like with Overtone, my previous system I was working on with Jeff Rose. The goal there was to make a really powerful system, not to make a simple system. And as programmers, we can think about all these beautiful abstractions we might write. But Sonic Pi's goal has always been to actually lower the barrier to entry, which means that every feature in Sonic Pi I can teach to a 10-year-old child, which is both a really taxing thing as a language designer and an application designer, but also really helps to get more people involved and get more people to do these kinds of things. I'm making a note to share link to other systems people on Patreon. Right. Okay. It's a good idea to add setup stuff like inputs, etc. and snippets. It is a really good idea, yeah, it works really nicely. Yes, and I really should make the snippets thing a primary documented feature. It just doesn't feel simple enough yet. It feels like it's sort of a thing you need to be a bit nerdy. You need to write special comments and need to have the right syntax. And if there's an error in there, there's no clear sort of thing that happens and how it's described. And you've got to open it up an external editor to do it. So there's lots of barriers to entry that I don't want So I'm happy to keep it secret for now, but I want to try and address those if I can get the time to actually to work on it. Yeah, Joseph Wilk is awesome. Does some really cool stuff. But he's specifically Sonic Pi as well. So there's lots of other live coding systems around. Sonic Pi was influenced by my previous system, Overtone, which in turn was influenced by things like Extempore and Impromptu and Ixilang, and obviously non-music systems like Logo and Processing, which all have been really influential to what I do. Any more questions? Just sitting here waiting. I should have some stuff to do whilst I'm waiting for questions, but I don't. Maybe that's the next thing to think about, is filler pieces. Are you happy just to watch me just stand here waiting? Yes, it's probably good if whilst I'm talking, keep asking questions so that they're there waiting for me. So when I finish answering an existing question, a new one is there ready for me to start answering. I don't really know. I can't really spend more time. I could try and extend the answers to previous questions. That's a good idea. But yeah. So people are watching me just standing around, which is pretty fun. I mean, do you want to know about these keyboards I've got? Is that something interesting to you? Or a future of what I'm working on is, or what kind of things would you like to know? I should probably go back and edit these bits out. Yes, please do bite. Thank you for the MIDI implementation. Yeah, well, so the MIDI implementation is brilliant because that is the first major sort of functionality that I didn't write pretty much all of the code of myself. I've been designing it in my head for many, many years. I just didn't have the skills or the patience to implement aspects of it. So the design of it was something I'd come up with that was clear to me, but the way to implement that was something I didn't have the skills for. So the two things I needed were very, very low level open sound control to MIDI converter, which then once I got that, then Sonic Pi could obviously send open sound control messages. It would be then easy just to send open sound control message and get it converted to MIDI, and also vice versa as well. So I didn't have to implement MIDI inside Sonic Pi, because when I implemented the MIDI stuff in Overtone, which was on the JVM, it was just a nightmare really. It was just for different versions of operating systems. It was all slightly different, and the support was a bit flaky. So so I had this idea, but I just didn't know how to implement it. So we have fabulous contributors which came along and got involved and listened and made this possible. And we use Port Audio as well to actually as a low-level library, which is well supported. No, not Port Audio, Juice, which is well supported across multiple platforms. And that was Louis Lorette who implemented that. Very kind of him to do so. But then the other aspect of it was that Sonic Pi can send open sound control messages, but it couldn't send them well timed because it was doing it from Ruby, and Ruby swishing around with time, and GC can kick in and pause a bit. So the other aspect was, because we didn't need that with the existing music part, because SuperCollider itself, the synthesis engine, does all the timing really nicely. So it has a very high priority C++ thread, which is just sitting there, and it doesn't have any I/O, doesn't have any memory allocations. So it just sits there waiting for a queue to pop a message on, and then in the message will be an activity to perform and a time to perform it. So it's then able to then place that in a proper sort of time queuing system, and when that time occurs, it's able then to execute those instructions. So with SuperCollider, all you need to do is to send it the instructions you want it to do, like play a synth or play a sample, and then inside that instruction you say what time you'd like that to happen, and then you send that ahead of time, as long as it's sufficiently ahead of time that it doesn't take too long to actually be received, which is not very long at all, then SuperCollider will then honour those things in its best ability. But with open sound control messages on the network and with the MIDI stuff, SuperCollider doesn't support that. You can't I mean, it might be an interesting activity to try and rip out that scheduler and repurpose it, but it seemed to make more sense to build my own scheduler. But then you've got the problem of the fact you want the scheduler to be low level, it needs to have no memory allocations, needs to have a very strong sense of time. So although I could probably build a schedule like that in Ruby in half an hour, it's not much work at all really. It's just basically receive a message off the network, deconstruct it, find the time, spawn a thread, seek for the difference between the current time and that time, and then execute the body of the message. That would have all the problems I've described before in terms of garbage collection and pauses and things. However, there's a fabulous language called Erlang, which has exactly these semantics. So the implementation in Erlang is exactly this. So it just waits for a message on the network, deconstructs it, extracts the time, spawns a thread, waits for the time to pass, and then sends a message on. But the nice thing about Erlang is that each process in Erlang is a lightweight sort of green thread process, so it's not an operating system process, so they're very, very quick to spawn. But also they're all isolated in terms of memory. So there's no global garbage collection, there's no pause the world to do some stuff. And so you can really rely on this for accurate timing, and it's between 1 and 2 milliseconds in terms of accuracy, which is great. And the nicest thing about that, as I said before, about this whole feature is that it was implemented by other people. So Joe Armstrong, one of the co-creators of Erlang, wrote that code for me, which is really, really kind. So for me, the MIDI system is not just beautiful because it works, it's beautiful because it was a design that I imagined but couldn't build, but found some really fabulous collaborators to help me turn something which was in my head into reality. That's a really nice thing to happen. Here's a question. If you're teaching kids, imagine the first few minutes it's easy to wow and then get them interesting, but after that, any advice that helps them keep going and trying? So kids is hard, yeah, and in the intermediate levels of Sonic Pi is something I don't have much experience with. So I've done a lot of workshops with children, getting them started, and that wow factor, as you say, is there for sure, but I haven't really spent much time with kids beyond that. So it's always been fresh children all the time, not prolonged relationships with children over a period of time, as you might with, say, a guitar teacher, any kind of peripatetic teacher. So this is something I don't really have much experience with, and I'm struggling with. We have a project which is just about to start, which is going to help me address this, but really I don't know other than to figure out what kind of music style they like, and start to try and help them move towards that style, and at all times trying your best to manage their expectations, because I think it's very easy to think that you can make amazing music very quickly, and obviously you can't. It's very easy to make horrible music very quickly, and to have that sort of experience of making music you don't like be part of the learning process, to know that that's just something you have to do, so you can figure out actually the temporal semantics of the execution model of what's going on. These obviously fancy words. You've got to know what the code sounds like, and how when you change a code, what the difference of sound is. And these are things you can learn without it sounding amazing, and actually probably shouldn't be. In the same way, if you practice scales on a guitar, it doesn't sound amazing, but you're learning about fingering and movement and motor skills. And so I think the equivalent of those things in Sonic Pi are sort of brain activities, they're sort of compositional things, like knowing that this particular shape of code has this particular output, and that you could apply that thing to many different, for example, you can take an algorithm, very simple algorithm in Sonic Pi, feed different synthesizers in and get dramatically different results, or feed different samples in and get dramatically different results, but you're using the same sort of code shape. So learning what those are would be a very nice thing to do, and actually getting the community to start to help document these and find a way to actually bring them into one place and give them names would be a beautiful thing to do, because then we can start to have a vocabulary which is a bit more higher level than what we've currently got, which is sort of play and sleep, which to be honest, I don't think is the future of Sonic Pi really. It's a base construct which you would be building on abstractions on top. Can I talk a bit about integration of hardware and other tools into your setup? When, how, for what purpose do you use the Strike, FET or Mono, and what are your plans for future performances? Good question. So the current hardware setup I've got is this just Mac, which I'm actually unhappy with. It's very fancy, but it often syncs into iCloud, and I get really low performance when it's doing some horrible process in the background. I really go on to just a dedicated machine at some point. So I think that might change in the future. But this is connected to the sound card, it's Apollo Twin thing, which is made out of metal, is super robust. Actually, if I move the camera, perhaps grab this thing. I can't see what you can see now, so I'm just going to switch across. Oh, okay, so yeah, so here's the Apollo. If I take the stupid filter thing off, filter. There we are. So you can see this is the sound card. You can actually see my voice going in there, and that's currently just got. It's only got 2 inputs. So one of them's a microphone, and the other one is the mono. I think actually it's not even plugged in. Oh yes, there's a blue cable there. But that's typically basically got the strike FET and the mono connected as inputs, and then the outputs go to the speakers. In addition to that, I have, so that's just bringing the audio in. Then of course I've got this Moog Minitor, which is a very small bass synthesizer that's for like sort of acid style sounds. I can show you that if you want to in a moment. And then the strike FET, which is sort of cheesy string sounds. And the only reason I've got these two really is because they both pass sort of these tests I have, which is basically needs to be small and portable, and also have USB MIDI in and out. Because when I turn the knobs, I want to be able to see those values on the screen. So I want users to be able to see, or the audience to be able to see that the knobs are being turned. I don't want the interface which I see not to be something that your audience can sort of partake in. And also to be able to think about external controllers as well. So both these are USB connected and both receive MIDI messages and also send MIDI messages when I convert them. And sadly there's not that many devices like this of this size available. Everyone seems to be going Eurorack and have lots of wires and cables on top, and I don't want that. I want the computer to be able to essentially patch the things for me rather than have to do it manually. Just it seems a bit daft. I think the Eurorack things look cool, but to me the coder gives you a lot more flexibility. The mono is something I'm not really using properly yet, so I have it set up so that, see if I can make it work. I don't know if this buffer's still got stuff in it. No. I should get the code working for next time. So that's a note for next time. At the moment it's just using it to flash when the beat is, so we've got it on a metronome. So this is when I'm working with my guitarist friend. He'll be able to look at it to say, this is when the loop's about to start recording, so that he knows when the beats are. So it's just using it as a display. But of course, when I press the buttons, you can see those events coming in on the right hand side. You can obviously program it to do anything you want. One thing I've been playing with a bit is putting like a pentatonic scale on it or something, and then using that to trigger the Minitor manually. But you do get the issue that you do need to practice this a lot, because it can sound pretty rubbish pretty quickly if your timing's not right. But I think that ultimately what I wanted to do is actually to visualize the live loops and be able to interact with them, to be able to toggle them on, toggle them off, to be able to set drum patterns with them as well. And we did all the stuff that we did with Overtone in the past. But I want to be able to put inside Sonic Pi. But again, it's like making that work to make it simple enough for a 10-year-old kid. But there's lots of potential here. I just haven't got there yet. Then they've got these crazy keyboards which just are there to look cool. Really, that's their primary purpose, to actually get people to realise that when I'm writing the code with this stupid wooden thing, it's like a guitar, right? So guitars are wooden and they look nice. Why shouldn't keyboards be the same? So it's for the audience to see I'm doing something different. But also these are all individually it's interchangeable, so I can actually start to visualize aspects with the keys eventually. And also you can program the keys to do anything you want. So there's lots of opportunity for interesting interaction with these things. But they just look fun. So and that's the thing. I also got really bad on this wrist, bad RSI. So hopefully that's going to fix that. And that's really it. That's the setup really. So you have strike FET, the monome, sorry, the Minitor going into the sound card. You've got the monome going straight into the computer, and then you've got the keyboards. And that's all. I'm trying to focus on things which fit in that box, as I said before. Yeah, and this subfat is nice to do to tinker around with, but it's not something I work with on a daily basis. More questions? Is that good to answer your question? So what happens? What happens when you're making music with other instruments, more than one sonic pi? Let me just put the camera back, and then I can. There we go. There we are. And now I'm not pink anymore, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's answer this question. What happens when you're making music with others? What instruments, more than one sonic pi? So I work with a guitarist friend, and that's a lot of fun, and we plug his guitar straight into the sound card, and then I'm able to then add effects like reverb and distortion, but I'm also able to record his audio coming in with the buffer effect, so the record effect, and then use the onset option to then sort of pick out individual guitar strum hits and then change the order and throw them back in his face, which is a lot of fun. So essentially adding effects like a guitar pedal, but also working like a looper and having that all be in time with everything else is what I do with Ben. I have worked with other instrumentalists in the past. I worked with a pianist called Gregor Schwellenbach. I did a couple of performances with him, one where we set the speakers on fire, which is quite fun. But he's a pianist, and so he just improvised and I improvised, and we just used the fact we were in the same space together to perform. So there wasn't any technical connection other than sort of a social, musical connection, and that was a lot of fun. I've worked with live poets who have improvised a sort of a poetry session, but then I've taken her voice and put it into Sonic Pi and manipulated it with the effects live. And more than one Sonic Pi is something that's not really simple yet. I tried it in a workshop in France, in Paris, a few weeks ago, and it's still not. You've still got to set up all the networks, and know IP addresses, and share those things. And even then, there's no notion of synchronized clocks. So there's a lot more work to be done to make that 10-year-old ready. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for synchronizing multiple Sonic Pis, both co-located and distributed, so that you can jam together in a gig together, but also jam whilst we're in different locations. So that's something I want to work on, but I haven't yet. Oh, great, thanks for liking it, Boris. So I've got no idea either. So this is really just me experimenting, and hopefully you give me feedback what you do like and what you don't like, so I can actually change it for next time. I think it could be a nice idea to have tutorials about compositional language and concepts, except the existing ones. Like I said, a Sonic Pi is a musical instrument and would like to see more tutorials or lessons. Completely agree. Although I'm still learning how to use it myself, so I think maybe we could start to use these live streams as a way to start to pick apart what kind of questions you have on composition of language, and then perhaps I could start to answer them in streams like this, so that we can then, and maybe if I get a bunch of questions which are the same, that then starts to say, hey, well, actually we should release this as a separate sort of video or post. And one of the reasons why I'm doing these live streams as well is I wanted to actually get set up. I want to get to understand how this works, what feels good, what sounds good, so that I can start to actually make my own video tutorial. So hopefully you can help me in that direction of figuring out what kinds of things such a tutorial should answer. How did you miss the Sonic Pi stickers? Well, there aren't any really. There's just a few that really nice chap in America sent to me. He just produced a few of them. I have like 4 left. So I need to make some more. I haven't got any yet. So if someone wants to help me do that, great. But maybe I should make some and try and just sell them for cost and then get people to stick them on their laptops. Got to get some of those, yes. Any more questions? I think we've run out of questions. We're going for 40 minutes, that's pretty good. I have no idea what to expect from this. The fact that you're listening is fabulous, thank you very much. And thank you so much for supporting me on Patreon. It's been it's beautiful to see that the people are actually interested, and to the extent where they want to support me going forward. And I think that I really hope that I can get myself into a financial position where it really is feasible to continue doing this, because I really think there's such benefit for the world to see new approaches to programming and making music, and without an ambassador like myself, and it doesn't have to be me, it could be lots of other people, really pushing the story out and sharing it with people, it's going to be much harder to share that vision. Did you say with the MIDI input to Sonic Pi it could update the values? So Julian, are you talking about the MIDI controller itself being able to receive values, or are you talking about Sonic Pi being able to receive values? I mean, actually, you can do both. When you manipulate the MIDI controller, can you see? Oh, this one's not connected. This one's connected. So you can see the strike fare values streaming across the screen. Is that visible on your screen? Oh no, because I've changed the scenes. You probably can't see. There we are. If I move back to Sonic Pi, can you see that these values are moving up and down? So these are input values. These are CC messages, control change messages, which the MIDI device sends through the MIDI cable to the computer, which then you're able to then write code to basically say, to listen for those control messages and say, when the next control message of this pattern occurs, do this thing. So you could obviously manipulate any sounds with these values. But of course the inverse is true as well, so you can send control messages from Sonic Pi to your external devices, and depending on what those devices do, and there's no sort of unified, seems, approach, each device has its own sort of MIDI table that describes what the different CC messages do, whether they light lights up, or whether they change the synthesizer sounds, or all sorts of different things. Then depending on the synthesizer, it will then obviously do its different activity. So you can, for example, instead of manipulating this knob manually, you can manipulate it with code. So you can tell Sonic Pi to send messages which will change the value 70 to between 0 and 127, or knob 76. In this case, it's the tone knob on the strike fet, or the tremolo knob is 77, or the attack knob happens to be 80. So if you know the value of the control knob, and typically the synthesizer will be set to receive CC messages, and then instead of physically moving the knob, you can actually control it from a process, which means you could use the Minitor knob to change the strike fet controls if you want to, or you can use I've got a I don't know his drawers. I can't see it. I have a oh, that's not there. I have just a generic MIDI controller that just has some knobs you can turn that don't do anything, but they send these CC messages out. So then you can then control this synthesizer with this controller over here, and have Sonic Pi route those controls to each other. Stuff in your questions. Gotta get it on making. Yeah, please do, Alison. It'd be great to have some stickers. We can't see the code. Still can't see the code. Sorry, you can't see the code. I thought you could. On my screen it says you can. Weird. But anyway, you don't need to see the code. All you can see is on the right hand side there's a log which goes up and down with the values and I'm turning the controllers. So it's not. It's just an event coming in. Oh, cheerio, Boris. Thank you so much for joining. I think I need to leave in a couple of minutes to do. I've got a call. So I think we should probably wrap up. That's probably a good time to wrap up. So please write comments in Patreon about what worked, what didn't work. This is totally an experiment for me, so I'm not expecting this to be the best thing you've ever seen. I'm just expecting it just to be a starting point which we can iterate over, and hopefully try and each time make it slightly more meaningful, slightly more useful for you. So perhaps for the next stream, which I'll probably try and do next week, I'm going to try and do a few of them packed together before I sort of make them more separate and regular, to try and just get a head around what's going on. Perhaps you can ask some questions beforehand so I can then start to prepare answers for those rather than have to do them live. And perhaps we should also talk about aspects of Sonic Pi, of how I use it, that I can code some examples. So I've set it up so you can actually hear the output of the audio, so we can start to try and explore different sort of code constructs, how I maybe work. Maybe you can show me how you do things, and I can say what aspects work well for me or not, and we can hopefully try and increase everybody's knowledge that way. Cool. Thank you very much for watching, and tune in next time. Cheerio.